Bonjour, good day. My name is Ian Morrison. I speak for the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. Good afternoon and thank you for coming out. Je vais commencer en français et l'anglais suivre. Malgré sa soi-disant conversation au sujet de l'avenir de Radio-Canada, à laquelle elle a convié les citoyennes, la direction de la SRC a déjà déterminé la nature et l'envergure des coupures massives que le président Hubert Lacroix proposera au conseil d'administration à sa réunion des 17 et 18 juin ici à Ottawa. Au menu pour les francophones du pays, quelques pertes. La perte des services régionaux. Les bulletins de nouvelles régionales à Québec, en Mauricie, au Saguenay et sur la côte nord seront amputés de moitié et centralisés encore davantage à Montréal. Ces centres perdront aussi leurs animateurs locaux à Espace Musique et du temps d'antenne à la première chaîne. La perte de spécificité. Hubert Lacroix, l'homme de Harper à la SRC, parle de One Company. Il veut fusionner plusieurs services des réseaux français avec ses réseaux anglais. La perte démocratique. Il y aura de moins en moins du genre de journalisme d'enquête qui a déclenché la création de la commission Charbonneau, par exemple. Cela coûte cher. Il y aura davantage de publicité en ondes. Une grande perte culturelle. Radio-Canada ne sera plus en mesure de jouer son rôle clé dans le développement culturel du pays en investissant dans les festivals, des films et en diffusant les événements importants d'identité francophone au pays. Il n'y aura jamais plus de grandes séries dramatiques avec les reconstitutions historiques et des costumes de l'époque comme Les Filles de Caleb, Musée Eden et tant d'autres. Et il n'y aura plus aucune programmation originale à jour. La direction de la SRC fait preuve d'une absence totale de respect en traitant son public loyal de manière si cynique et manipulatrice, c'est à couper le souffle. Non seulement la SRC demande aux citoyennes de participer à une conversation insignifiante, mais elle pose des questions dans un sondage en ligne avec des choix bidons et des questions biaisées qui ne font que promouvoir ces décisions déjà prises. Comme on dit, c'est arrangé avec des gars des vues. Les experts indépendants respectés de l'Institut de recherche et d'information socio-économique ont déclaré que ces résultats de ce sondage sont entièrement invalides grâce à ces nombreuses failles méthodologiques. En réalité, la direction de la SRC a déjà pipé les dés à huis clos. Si les citoyennes qui aiment la SRC se tiennent debout maintenant et rejettent les coupures que nous exposons aujourd'hui, nous pouvons forcer M. Lacroix et les autres acolytes du Premier ministre Harper de refaire le devoir. Voilà pourquoi nous lançons aujourd'hui une nouvelle campagne vidéo. Nous n'avons pas tous les mains liées. Les coupures qui s'en viennent avec celles annoncées du 18 avril sont le résultat direct des coupures de budget sauvages et vindictives des conservateurs Harper. Ça ne me surprend pas que le président Lacroix attribue la crise financière de la SRC à d'autres facteurs, ni qu'il cherche à manipuler les citoyennes. Après tout, c'est au Premier ministre Harper qu'il doit son gagne-pain. Stephen Harper, c'est comme mission de faire taire, de diminuer et de contrôler notre SRC exactement comme il a fait pour une longue liste des gens et d'institutions qu'il perçoit comme les ennemis. Notre campagne entend de démontrer que son gouvernement ne peut pas noyer la voix de ceux qui soutiennent la radiodiffusion publique au pays, c'est-à-dire la vaste majorité d'entre nous. Despite the, quote, conversation Canadians have been invited to join on CBC's future, management has already decided on a range of sweeping new cuts that President Lacroix will recommend to the CBC board when it meets here in Ottawa on June 17 and 18. Here is a menu of the cuts. Gutting CBC Radio 2, shutting down its over-the-air distribution in favor of an exclusively online music offering. Over several decades, Radio 2 has become an essential element of Canada's cultural life, showcasing and supporting Canadian creative and performing talent. Chopping CBC Television's high-quality, award-winning, non-commercial morning children's programs. This will include shows like Arthur and Poco, valued safe havens for children and their caregivers to turn to for stimulation, learning, and fun, all essential roles for any public broadcaster worthy of the name. Cuts to local programming. For example, the cancellation of afternoon Radio 1 shows in places such as Thunder Bay, places where they are most needed. This follows CBC's recent decision to abandon plans to expand local service to underserved communities such as London. These measures will turn the CBC into a Toronto broadcasting corporation. The cynical, manipulative, and disrespectful manner in which CBC's management is treating its loyal audiences is nothing short of breathtaking. Not only has the CBC asked Canadians to join in a meaningless conversation, it is asking questions in an online survey with false choices and biased questions that promote the already decided corporate line. Independent experts have declared the results that might arise from that survey invalid because of its methodological flaws. In reality, CBC management has stacked the deck towards decisions already made behind closed doors. If Canadians who love the CBC take a stand now and reject the planned cuts we are exposing today, we could force Mr. Lacroix and others installed by Prime Minister Harper to go back to the drawing board. That is why we are launching a new campaign video called They Can't Drown Us All Out. The online campaign is at freethecbc.ca, srclibre.ca. We will screen the campaign video in English and French now.
Aïe aïe, j'en viens pas. Après tout ce temps-là à lécher ses bottes? Oui, vous avez raison, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Non, Monsieur le Premier ministre, votre complet vous grossit pas le nez. Puis là, c'est une petite affaire. Puis merci, bonsoir. J'ai juste dit qu'on devrait peut-être laisser Radio-Can tranquille. Tu sais, ils ont déjà assez de misère comme ça. La minute que je l'ai dit, j'ai su que ça tournerait mal. Évidemment, tu prends le contrôle du diffuseur public, puis là, tu te débarrasses de tes opposants. Ou tu te pointes chez eux avec des beignes en disant « Allons à la pêche ».
Nous n'avons pas tous les mains liées. Libérer Radio-Canada de l'ingérence politique, appuyer la campagne.
Oh, man. Can you believe this? After all these years of loyalty? Yes, Prime Minister. No, your nose doesn't look too big in that suit, Prime Minister. Then you say one thing and whammo. All I said was, maybe we should leave the CBC alone. I mean, geez, they just lost Hockey Night in Canada. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I was in trouble. I should have known. First you take over public broadcasting, then you get rid of people you don't agree with, or you just show up on their doorstep with some fresh Timmies and say, let's go fishing.
They can't drown us all out. Join the campaign to free the CBC from political interference.
These upcoming cuts, combined with those announced on April 10th, are the direct result of the Harper Conservatives' punishing budget cuts. I am not surprised that President Hubert Lacroix attributes the CBC's financial crisis to other factors, or that he is manipulating Canadians. After all, he owes his job to Prime Minister Harper. Stephen Harper's mission has been to silence and control our CBC, just as he has done with a long list of other perceived enemies. And in today's newspaper, we read of a new government policy to privatize the CBC. This campaign is intended to demonstrate that his government cannot drown out the voices of Canadians who support public broadcasting. That is to say, the vast majority of us. J'aimerais répondre à vos questions. I'm pleased to respond to any questions that you might have.
We know the first thing that the minister is going to say is that CBC makes their own decisions, that the government doesn't control them. So what do you say to that?
That would come from a minister who makes his own decisions. The CBC does have a measure of independence from the government, a measure, and it's becoming lower and lower. The board of directors of the CBC is appointed by the Prime Minister. The president of the CBC is appointed by the Prime Minister. All the senior decision-making people are appointed by the Prime Minister. 9 of the 12 directors are financial supporters or have been financial supporters of the Conservative Party. Actually, I have the details in my pocket if you're interested. So that minister has lost all credibility with me, and that minister's predecessor is the person who promised the CBC maintaining or increasing its funding during the last election campaign.
The Media Guild of the CBC recently asked its employees not to talk publicly in any way that would negatively affect the corporation, or I think the word was don't comment or don't say anything that would reflect negatively on the corporation. How appropriate is that for CBC employees to be asked not to talk bad about their employer? Wouldn't they naturally have some serious concerns about the way it's being managed, where the corporation is being managed?
I don't know, but you're talking about the Canadian Media Guild? The president of the Canadian Media Guild sent me an email, probably have it on my iPhone over here, congratulating us on what we were doing back in April in drawing these things to public attention.
So, who has the responsibility then to increase support for the CBC? Should it be CBC employees or the public?
CBC, by an act of Parliament, is responsible to its shareholders, the people of Canada, through the Parliament. And what has been happening in the last little while is that more and more of the effective power has come into the hands of the government. Not just this government, although this government has taken it to new extremes, but we all have a stake. Now, the only way that we can express our stake effectively in a democracy like Canada is through the electoral process. And one of the things my organization, handicapped a little by a policy that it is nonpartisan, but we call a spade, we intend to make this issue a major issue in the next general election. And we have all the opposition parties in our corner. And by the way, a majority of people who would vote Conservative today support public broadcasting. Check the Nanos polls on our website.
Are you suggesting that if it's the Conservative government policy to make serious cutbacks to the CBC, perhaps even privatize the CBC, and if their board, the CBC's board, is appointed by the government, are you suggesting that the board of the CBC wants to get rid of the CBC?
I have no idea what the board of the CBC wants to do. I mean, they are 12 individuals. They, as I mentioned to your colleague, 9 of them, according to Elections Canada data, are are financial supporters of the Conservative Party. I just don't know what they want to do. The evidence suggests that there's a conflicted loyalty. In other words, that there's an effort to turn the CBC into a conservative broadcasting corporation, to cut the arm's length relationship. And we compare the CBC, SRC, with other public broadcasters in democratic countries, from Korea to Japan to Australia to Britain to Germany to Holland to Norway, and France. And we find that CBC's arm's length relationship from the government is threatened.
Most of the current cuts right now are coming because they're not going to be able to get the ad revenue from Hockey Night in Canada. So, how exactly? I'm just wondering how.
That's not true. That is stuff that the CBC is sort of putting out there, and you read it in a number of places. But I'll try to just tell you briefly. In the last contract from 07 to 13, the CBC was responsible for sending $120 million a year to New York. And they had responsibility to make the programs. And they were raising $130 million in advertising. You do the math, it's sort of a break-even situation. They lost the rights to Hockey Night in Canada, having bid more than $200 million a year for it to a much wealthier bidder. But that bidder has come back to them and said, we'll give you the programming for free. Now, where CBC would have been in trouble would be if they had to put on 300-400 hours of new primetime programming and pay for it. They've got that programming for free. They would have been worse off if they had got the rights to Hockey Night in Canada. And yet they hang that out there. The real reason that these cuts are happening is because in 2012, the Conservative government broke its electoral promise to maintain or increase funding for the CBC and imposed a 10% cut. But the government, in its wisdom, decided to implement the cut in stages. So in 2012-13, it was 3%, and in 2013-14, it was 6%. And this April, just 50 days ago, it hit the full 10%. What we are seeing today is not the result of the loss of Hockey Night in Canada, not the softening of television advertising. This is the full impact of the 10% cut, the broken electoral promise. I could give you a longer answer, but we're only allowed in here for a few minutes, right?
Just tell us how much money you think the government, how much more money the CBC needs to be, I guess, self-sustaining in your view?
It doesn't matter what I think. What I would do is quote to you the report of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage about 5 years ago, Jan, when it studied the CBC. And in that situation, the committee recommended that the CBC should get at least half, on a per capita basis, what the average is of public broadcasters in the democratic countries, the OECD countries. And to do that, to get it to half what the other countries have, would have required an increased investment of $100 million a year, each year for 5 years. So we're talking about $500 million of additional public funds to put the CBC to 50% of what the BBC, ABC, NHK Japan are already doing. That's an opinion of the majority of a House of Commons committee just a few years ago. I think it speaks for itself.
What is the specific goal that you're trying to accomplish with this? Is it, you mentioned something about sending them back to the drawing board. Is it to for them to rethink these cuts? Is it for the government to rethink the funding cuts that it's had to the CBC?
Yeah. Our prime goal is to alert Canadians to what is going on. And as I speak, 250,000 messages have gone out with a better quality copy of that video than we were running here today. So we're trying to alert Canadians to what is going on. You're familiar with the notion of an ounce of prevention. This is trying to let people know before the fire starts, before the changes are announced, what the stakes are. We have found out because very honorable people taking some risk, people we trust, people who have advised us in the past and have not let us down inside the corporation, have brought this information to our attention. And so our goal is to make it public because we know, because Nick Nanos has found out on our behalf, that something like 80–85% of Canadians really like public broadcasting, and they are not going to be happy with the details of things that I've told you about today. I would, by the way, don't go away on the weekend. This is the kind of announcement when the CBC gets around to it that will be made at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, probably.
Finally, I just want to ask you, you mentioned that the CBC is becoming a little less arm's length from the governments and from, I guess, compared to other public broadcasters. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Briefly. I think the most important thing, there are many examples I've already mentioned, I won't repeat, around appointments and all of that. Conservative Party, the word hack I suppress and say Conservative Party supporters on its board, all of that. I think the most important thing was a clause buried in the Budget Implementation Bill of 2013, which brought CBC under the Financial Administration Act. Flora MacDonald in Mr. Mulroney's cabinet, when she introduced the Broadcasting Act, the Broadcasting Bill in Parliament, specifically said that CBC had to be independent from it because otherwise journalists were effectively being supervised by the Treasury Board, which is controlled by the government, and that would turn the public broadcaster into a state broadcaster. And so I think that's the fundamental principle. And when the person at the tail of that video says, liberate or free the CBC from political interference, it is that ability of Treasury Board to supervise the labor negotiations, the strategies for dealing with the unions. Effectively, the 2,000 to 3,000 journalists who work for the CBC would soon learn and are learning that the real boss is the Prime Minister. That's not good for Canadian democracy.